2013, and we're at the Louisville Fire Department today. And we are interviewing 7 of the former firemen, all volunteers, and all of you were volunteers. Many of you were chiefs once or one or more times, and you were with the fire department at least 20 years. So I'm going to be asking why you decided to dedicate your time to protecting this community and its residents, and what the fire department was like when you were serving. And we'll get to some interesting, quote, interesting moments that you had. And we have at least an hour here to talk, so plenty of time. When you do speak, be sure and give your name. Jean Morgan is on the camera today, and my name is Barbara Chagan. We're doing this for the Louisville History Museum's Oral History Project. So we are going to start around to the left, and I'm going to be asking your name and how long you lived in Louisville. So go.
My name is George Brown. I've lived in Louisville since December 1939.
And how long were you at the fire department?
I was a volunteer for 20 years. I joined in 1959 and retired in 1979.
All right, 20 years of dedication. Were you working in what fire department were you working in?
Louisville Volunteer Fire Department.
Okay, all right. And were your parents or grandparents
No,
in Louisville, or you moved
we
here
all
yourself?
migrated here from Roseland, Kansas.
All right.
Had no other relatives here.
From the flats to the mountains.
Right.
Right. Let's go on, and I will now ask Ron to introduce himself.
Hi, Ron Leggett. I live at 901 Lincoln Avenue in Louisville, and I joined the fire department when I was 21 years old in 1954. And
how long did you serve?
I served almost 22 years.
And you've been retired, so you didn't work in the brand new station?
No.
You worked in
Well,
the
Station 1.
Uh-huh.
I was at Station 1
Uh-huh.
because that was when it was first built, when we moved from downtown up to Station
Okay.
1.
Okay. And did you have a nickname? We didn't ask George about his nickname. Yeah. George, did you have a nickname?
Chaz or Charlie.
Chaz, Charlie. Oh, okay.
My nickname was Legs, naturally. That's the last name.
You all had nicknames, I expect.
Well, most all of us, I
Yeah.
think.
Howard,
Yes,
your name?
Howard Pollock, and I've lived in Louisville for 70 of the 73 years, and I
Sounds like all your life.
just about, my great-grandparents homesteaded
Uh-huh.
where Storage Tech is,
Oh, really?
and so we've been in the neighborhood a few days,
Right, right.
so
Did you give me your nickname?
the only thing I ever went by was Hap.
Hap?
Yeah, it's my initials, so.
Oh, okay. All right. All right, Jean.
My name is Eugene A. Crancy, born in Louisville in 1929, and have lived here all my life. My parents, my father is from Italy, and my mother was born in Marshall, Colorado. And a very interesting story, my dad, when he came in to New York, he was to go to Ohio, but they mistakenly sent him to Colorado. And he met my mother, and so they got married.
And it was a mistake to come to Colorado in the first place. Huh?
6 children, and I've been in the fire department for 27 years. I started in '53 and retired in 1980.
All right, thank you, Jean. And nickname, did we get a nickname?
Well, everybody calls me, my family calls me Eugene. Everybody else calls me Chooch.
All right, I've heard that. Jack, your name?
No, I don't know where that came
Right.
from.
John A. Steinbach. Jack. Fire Department 52. Left the department, I'm not sure about that, about 28 years, I think I was there. What else you want to know?
Well,
Born and raised in Louisville.
right, and your,
Big mover, I moved across the street.
your parents were here and your grandparents.
Well, my mother come out of Canada,
Mhm,
and my dad was born right here close.
mhm.
Um,
Right, and you were with the fire department for, you think, about 28 years.
I'm sure I'm close there, yeah.
All right. Bill?
My name's Bill Ryan. I lived in Louisville for 62 years. Was fire chief from 71 to 73. Joined in 65, retired in 85,
All right.
20 years.
Parents here,
My
grandparents?
my dad was from Kansas, my mother was from Wisconsin. And we lived in Longmont and moved down here in 1951
I see.
and been here all ever since.
And did you have a nickname?
Goats was my nickname.
All right. Everybody laughs at that one, so they remember it, I'm sure.
Still there.
Right. And how long were you with the fire department?
20 years, from
20 years.
1965 till 1985.
Okay, all right. And Leo?
Yes, my name's Leo Dvorsky. I was born here in Louisville, lived here all my life, born in 1933. I joined the fire department in 1955, retired in 1977 for 22 and a half years. My parents lived here. My grandparents lived here. My great-grandparents immigrated from Poland and settled in Superior in 1985 or 1885. So my great-grandkids are seventh generation in this area.
Wonderful history. Wow.
Yeah,
And did you have a nickname?
no.
You're the only one? How did you get away with that? Okay, we're now going to have some questions, and anyone's welcome to answer it. But it sounds like most of you were very active during the 50s and in the 60s. Anybody before that, pretty much in the earliest? Okay.
No.
So tell me then, what was it like fighting fires during that time? What kind of equipment did you have? Tell me a little bit about where your station was, and anyone that would like to start with that.
Well, you know, we've got a long history in our department. And in the station here,
Mrs. Howard speaking.
yes, we've got the old hose cart that the firefighters used before they had any vehicles. You know, and that was all before our time. You know.
Yeah,
You know, we heard the stories of it.
but you know the history and the
Yeah,
stories.
and,
We
you know,
voted a lot.
we pulled it in parades and that,
Oh,
you
yes.
know, and so, you know, there's a lot of history that goes back, and I think it was, a lot of the stuff at that time was by guess and by gosh, you know, for equipment, because I know when we was first went in, we used to sell raffle tickets so we could buy boots.
Really?
Yeah, you know, and that was our big fundraiser, was every month we'd sell raffle tickets, and we'd end up buying our fire boots and a hard hat from a construction site for a helmet. You know, so we've come a long ways.
Who was the chief then?
Boy,
What year?
Petite,
Probably.
chief, you said?
I think that
The chief at the time.
Yeah, Petite, Nick Petite.
No. Goes back way back to Ben Woods and L.J. Masoni,
there's.
Mike Fabrizio.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of,
That's
yeah.
really, yeah, that's
a lot of
going way
people
back.
I remember.
that was long
Right,
before my time.
right.
That was way.
What are some of the other
There's
memories?
one error
This
in
is
here
George,
that says that the first fire station was on Spruce and Main.
Yeah.
It's not true. First fire station was on Main Street,
All right,
right next to the corner where Lulu's is now. Used to be
yes,
Phillips 66 station
Yes.
there. And that was the first fire station. My dad was a volunteer
really?
in the fire department at that time.
And what year would that have been? Do you know?
Oh boy, when did they tear that down?
30 and 40.
I don't,
Oh, probably.
I don't remember when
probably
they
in-
built the new.
I think it was in the
Late fifties.
late fifties,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah,
early
late
sixties.
fifties, early
They,
sixties.
they
So
tore
they-
it down in the
yeah.
late fifties
Yeah.
because they built the station at Spruce and Main. I lived next door to it in 1955. And it had only been there a couple of years.
So that would have been the second station
Right.
then?
That's
just-
station, it would have been actually station two.
Oh, okay, all right,
And the first one should have been preserved as a historic
Oh,
building.
yes.
It
Yes,
had
it's,
the
yes.
second floor and the tall steeple and the bell
Uh-huh.
tower. And
uh-huh.
it was great.
Jack, did you fight fires out of that first station or?
On Main Street.
Main, was it the one on Main and Spruce?
Well, through the week, my dad would get so mad because the four of us would run up to the equipment. The other fellows worked.
Because you were the ones that were here.
Yeah,
So-
and, sometimes Howard and sometimes Les Davis, Daryl Decker,
Graves.
and Leo, just who was in town.
Right,
Well, and if, this is Bill, the guys a lot of guys at that time, not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, quite a few of the guys worked shifts at their jobs.
I see,
So
yes,
there was some guys here during the day too as well.
okay, probably
You know,
trying
and-
to sleep.
Right, right. And of course, when the whistle blew, sleep was over, it's time to go. Because we were shorthanded during the day, you know.
So you were called out with the whistle.
or the bell. Remember the bell ringing?
No, the
The bell
siren.
was just for the
For my
meeting,
time.
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't for calls.
That's a
So-
big siren.
First the bell, and was the bell on top of the second station at Spruce and Main, or that was, by then it was the,
It was,
It was out back, there was a
Yeah.
bell tower
Okay.
out
Bell
back.
tower.
oh, okay. Uh-huh, all right. So, were you using the phone to call people out, or was it strictly just you
siren.
heard the
It
siren?
was a siren.
The siren called, actually, this is Ron.
Uh-huh.
Actually, we had several phones. The chief had a phone in his house, and generally the past chief had one in his house. And then there was one at the Hacienda that was run by Phil Panetta,
Okay,
and then there was the one in the city
Okay.
hall.
Hacienda, the restaurant.
That's the restaurant on Main
Yeah.
Street. That was,
Yeah.
it was a while back.
Right.
And so whoever answered the phone first, everybody had a siren button at their place. All they did was turn the
Oh,
button on,
Uh-huh,
and 3 rings of the siren were for in-town fires, and 4 rings were for out-of-town fires.
okay.
2 rings was for.
And 2 rings for emergencies.
Right.
Mhm.
So,
So about how many firemen, it was all men, right? So I-
It was full.
Uh,
We had a 40-member
40.
department, and there was a waiting list to get in for years.
Really? People really wanted to be firemen?
Yeah,
The fire department wasn't just a volunteer thing.
Yeah,
It was
Yeah.
kind of the social life in
This is
Louisville at
George
that time.
speaking, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh,
and so we had an awful lot of fun along with our volunteers.
right. So it was more of a family thing at times.
Yeah.
You all got
Yeah,
together.
right. This
What
is-
kind of training?
This is
Yes,
Leo.
Leo.
It was a family thing. My
Uh-huh.
father was a fireman. My uncle was a fireman. I was a
Really?
fireman at the same time, like Jack and his brothers.
Okay.
All 4
Yeah.
firemen at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the thing to do, because all of your friends belonged to the fire department, and like George stated, it was probably the only thing in town. So, and there were 8 to 10 applications for one opening, so it was very competitive, and all the young guys wanted to get in because their friends were firemen.
And the town was, what, about 2,000 people at
Yeah.
the time?
Probably at that time, yeah.
No, this is Gene talking.
Yes, Jane.
The interesting thing about this, I think, is the fact that we all became a part of the town because we wanted to be involved. We loved the town, and I think that shows now in the history. Because when I took the Money Magazine director to the city,
Yes.
and we were #1 in the country. The interesting thing, he said, why are these kids walking out there, nobody watching them? I says, we try, everybody's watching out for each other. He says, you're kidding me. He says, you never see this any other place. And I think that's what the city has done. And I think the fire department is one of the major organizations, along with the police department, that created the city to be #1, safest #1 city in the country.
It sounds like it.
I
How
mean,
did you get trained for this? What, did you just go out on the fires, or did you have training?
Yeah, we had, this is George, we had officers, captains, and they were in charge of fire training, and we were required 15 hours, I remember, a year. And it was training on how to run the trucks, and then we also formed a rescue squad. And we had rescue squad training once a month. Medical, first aid training. So we had pretty decent training.
So what is this about a medical squad? This was, did you have an ambulance, or?
You know, yeah.
Sort of, Leo?
This is Leo. The first ambulance we had was an old, I guess you
Civil
call it, was it
defense.
a 4x4?
For my army ambulance.
Army ambulance. And of course, it was khaki colored, and we scrubbed on that thing with sandpaper and got it all down, got it primed and painted it white with a big red cross on it.
Okay.
And that was our ambulance.
Yeah.
It was
I
an
mean,
old
it would probably
power
go,
plant.
to go up the hill over here, it would probably take a half hour. But
Right.
You
We got a
didn't
few
turn
things.
around at the corner, you went around the block.
we got a few things we got that through civil defense, of which L.C. Graves, or Bun Graves, was the head of at the time.
After the Second World War,
Yeah.
and they had a surplus.
Yeah. We got that probably in the
Oh, that was.
late 50s or
Yeah.
early 60s.
It was before I came in.
Yeah.
It was early 60s.
Early 60s.
Yeah.
So
But
what
we-
did you
we-
do before if someone had a heart attack?
What we call J.R. Henry.
Yeah.
It's too late,
Well,
is it?
No, he had the
He
ambulance.
had the
Oh, he
ambulance.
had, oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, prior to that time, we had a resuscitator, that was the extent of our medical equipment. And we did get calls before we physically formed the rescue squad.
We had
And we
Plectron.
would just take that out on a rural truck normally.
Yeah,
But we would answer calls with just the resuscitator. That's all we could do.
Jack, what did you say?
I said we all had Plectrons, was the name of the box that we had personally at home.
Oh, okay,
And different
That was
other,
That was quite late.
methods
Way
of-
later.
Yeah, that was way later, Jack, way after. So.
yeah, yeah. So were the
Yeah.
closest hospitals then Boulder and Longmont?
Boulder Community,
Boulder.
everything went to Boulder Community, or Boulder Sanitarium.
sanitarium.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, Mapleton Center now. But, we had one case years ago, old Toots Brown was her name, and we got her into the hospital, and we was waiting for people to get her into a bed, and this little nurse, she says, I can't handle her, and Leo picked her up and took her over and set her down in the bed and said, there you go.
Had to do a little nursing too.
Well, you know, the
Yeah.
people in the department, they done everything that was asked of them. You know, regardless of what it was, when it was, it was all,
Well,
that's the pride that this department had.
Yes.
This is Bill, Howard, a little more on what Howard's talking about. If we'd sometimes get a call and the person would pass. Well, then we'd call either the coroner or at that time it was Henning Howe. And the guy that run it for him was Bill Gaffield, a guy by the name of Bill Gaffield. Well, we'd have to wait for him to come so we could remove his body. And then they'd make all the arrangements and everything. And we'd have to help him actually load this body in his car or our ambulance and take it to the mortuary and help him load the body in because he had no help either. That's another thing we did as volunteers.
So you had a
That wasn't any
lot
fun.
of jobs besides
Right,
fighting
right.
fires.
It was like they said, helping one another, and that was one of the jobs. I had been on a couple of them, and that wasn't fun. That wasn't fun at all.
Yeah. Well, yes,
This is
Leo.
Leo. To revert back to the beginning,
Yeah.
if you would, well, sometime after the beginning,
Mhm.
the only truck that the city had was a 1932 Chevrolet, which we had. Wasn't a pumper, it was a truck with a bed on it, and we loaded the hose on that and went to a fire and pulled the hose off and hit a plug and fought the fire. And then after that, in 1952, the fire department started a drive to raise money and bought a 1952 Chevrolet, which was a pumper. So that was really a step up
Okay.
at that time. Well, then in 1957, this truck right here, this International, 4 of us drove back to Marshalltown, Iowa, where they built that truck, and drove it back to Louisville.
Okay.
And
That's the
then,
picture on the wall, that
Yeah,
we'll have to
that's-
film that later. Yes.
yeah, that's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And then after that, of course, things progressed where the equipment became more sophisticated. and, where we are today.
Yeah, well,
Up came a tax base.
Yeah, okay, so people were paying some taxes toward it then.
this is George. When I was chief, my budget for the year was $3,800,
Whoa.
which didn't leave much for equipment. Normally, we bought new hose and maybe a couple of nozzles, but that's about all. Other than that, we had to do, like they were saying a while ago, buy our own boots, our own
Oh,
coats.
you had to buy your own,
Well,
yeah,
we had fundraisers
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
to do it,
yeah.
but not out of the city budget.
Yes,
The tax base came from a rural district at that time, where we'd get in our vehicles and go to the surround outlying areas and try to tell these people that we would offer them fire protection if they would pay so
Oh,
much.
even if they were outside the
It wasn't a
city.
district, it was just a rural, and that's kind of how we raised money. Yeah,
That
As-
time it was city.
as George was saying, we didn't have a budget from the city. The first time we ever had a budget was when Gene Bardet was fire chief. Then we would just have to go meet with the city council and beg and plead with them that we needed some new hose, we needed this.
I see,
We didn't have a budget, they'd
Yeah.
appropriate,
yeah. It was one
X
piece by
amount
piece,
of dollars, not many.
yeah.
But we had to make things last and had to make do with
Yeah.
what we had.
They didn't hand you the money and say, here,
Yeah.
go spend it.
Yeah.
If you wanted to spend it, you had to spend it with their
Yeah.
approval.
Leo, again, our pension fund, we had raffles, we had everybody, just about everybody, all 40 of us would get 10 tickets and we'd sell them, and then off of the top of that, we'd take 15% and put towards our pension fund. That's how we started our pension fund. George can elaborate more on that because he was much involved with getting it going and probably had much to do with where it is today.
Have any of you studied the history of the fire department any more than, you've seen pictures and things of the first with the hoses but it was really maybe in the late 40s or early 50s when things started improving, and you got your first truck would have been in the early 50s?
52.
32. Well, the
First
the
pumper.
first truck.
Bumper.
Okay,
First bumper, yeah,
Right.
but 32 with the, we had 32, we still got it.
yeah, Yeah,
I remember that first pumper, this is Gene talking, when we were going down South Boulder Road and I was hanging on the back of the truck. And we were going so fast, I couldn't believe it.
wow.
And if anything happens, we're through.
Yeah. And was one of you driving? Jack, were you driving then, or?
No, I was in the back holding
You were
on.
holding
Yeah.
on, yeah.
Probably one of the Steinbachs, they
One of the
used to race to
Steinbachs
see who could
raced,
drive the truck.
oh, okay.
This is wrong. I think when the whistle blew, it was a race to see who would get to drive the truck.
I see, so,
And whoever was
Yeah.
next had to answer the phone,
oh,
and, you know.
uh-huh. So there wasn't a designated driver, but I think Jack has talked about the Steinbach brothers driving off and on.
At this point, I will. The Steinbach fire, Les Davis got in the seat of our brand new, what was the truck at that time?
The Mac.
Big Mac.
Yeah.
Parked it over by the plug. I went over to help him hook it into it, and the heat from the fire was melting some of the lights and things on that Big Mac, and we had to move it because of the heat of the fire.
Wow,
I'll never forget that.
wow. Well, let's talk about some of the fires. We don't have to wait on that. But talk about the Steinbach fire. How many of you were
To
involved?
date, I think it was the
I think
biggest one.
I think we were all there.
We
Really?
was all there for
Yeah.
that one, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I spent 24 hours, Bill, I spent 24 hours on that call that day, because we had pumped all that water into that building, put that fire out. That was that whole block down there on Front Street, where the Steinbach Pavilion is now.
Yeah.
From there up to the Primrose. That whole thing was basement. And we had pumped so much water into that fire overnight, and then we spent the whole next day pumping the basement out after we got the fire out.
And the date, do anyone remember?
1974.
It was after Labor Day, wasn't it? Just a day
It
or
was
two after
Labor
Labor
Day.
Day? Or it was
Right
Labor
on
Day?
Labor Day.
Yeah.
Labor Day weekend.
It was on the Labor Day weekend.
You know, this is Leo. One of the things I was thinking about in the past couple of days, you know, it's a wonder any of us survived with the amount of ammunition that was in there going off, and those little, what were those?
CO2 cartridges,
CO2 cartridges.
aerosol cans.
Yeah.
The next day, the next morning, I found some of them up by Main Street that had exploded. They were metal. And we were standing right there putting water on that darn thing.
I don't think anybody ever got hurt in that
No,
fire that
no.
I remember. I don't
No,
think.
it hurt.
No,
Good.
I think this is wrong. I think a lot of the fires at that time too, everybody had coal stoves. There was we had a lot of chimney fires
Mhm.
at that, in that time of the, you know.
And so these would be house fires, but the chimney fires.
Yeah, they were just chimney fires of the, getting backed up, and then they'd start a fire in the chimney, so we'd have to take care of that.
Could you save some of those houses?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
every
This
time
is
they,
Bill, just to elaborate on what Ron was talking about, chimney fires. Our tool for putting out chimney fires was a tire chain with a rope.
Yep.
And you get up on the roof and you drop that tire chain with that rope on it and knock all of that soot and
Oh,
fire
from the chimney.
loose. And then we'd have to clean up the kitchen of the house or the front room, whatever it was, because we made a big mess.
Yeah, but
And
you
we'd have
saved
to
the
cle-
house,
Well,
right?
yeah, but then we'd have to clean it up, but we got done.
That's what
This
it's
is
called.
George.
Yeah,
every
George,
time
and-
we,
Go ahead.
every time we had strong wind in the wintertime, we would all, not all of us, but several firemen would just go up to the fire hall and wait for the whistle to blow
That's right.
because we knew we were gonna have
Oh.
chimney fires.
Yeah.
Where the slag dump fire.
All the coal mines, the
Oh,
dumps.
Dump
Oh,
the
Yeah.
slag.
Centennium.
Yeah, so Howard, do you remember some of those?
Well, the other thing I remember is the second Steinbach fire, okay,
Yes.
which is where the mercantile is now.
Yeah,
We spent, I spent 24,
We
30 hours
I was
there.
there for long.
You
But-
bet. We did.
had to call in Boulder.
Well, we called in their chief over there and their recommendation was to get in some equipment in here and just tear it down so you can save the rest of the block. Well, the stubborn bunch we were, we sat there and done what we had to do to get it out. And Farmers Insurance gave us a $500 donation, the first and only donation that they ever made to a fire department.
really? Really?
And
Yes.
this
yes.
deal, and there again, we filled that basement full of water
Right.
and spent the next 2 or 3 days with a little pump pumping it out
Pumping it out.
Yeah.
onto Main Street.
Jack remembers that, I can see.
Fairly well, yeah.
One of the houses that was saved, one of the museum's houses was on fire. The Jordanelli house,
Oh,
it had it started fire. That was saved. It's now part of the historical part.
so it was the home at the time, it was before the
Yeah.
museum.
Gene, remember when that happened? We had our trucks there and we pulled every stick of furniture out of that house and took it down and put it in your garage so we could save it.
I remember that.
Well, you were close by. You
Right
were-
next door, right behind the alley.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. yeah. Well, it's a nice building, so I could tell you
Yes.
saved it.
Thanks to the fire department, the grain elevator is still standing.
That's right.
Well, let's hear about that grain elevator fire.
Well, me and Tom Cable was one of the elder firemen. We tried to open that west door, a slider type door, and we did get it open. And a beam about 16 inches square fell between us. Tom looked at me, I looked at him, and a good thing it didn't hit us. But it was a smoldering fire, not a blaze type fire. I can't remember how we ever got it out. It was the
I don't
daytime.
remember
That
that.
had to
When
be
when
a
was
big
it?
fire, I
It
wasn't-
was in the daytime.
Yeah, about when here, Jack?
I don't remember.
Probably in the 60s.
We were going to call on some people that were in the saloon, like a gentleman named Mike Fisher and some of them old barflies. We was going to call them to help us.
Yeah.
We had a lot.
So
No,
this
we
was.
didn't.
This was during the day, I take it,
Uh-huh.
and there weren't a whole lot of people in town to fight.
Well,
This is Gene again. I remember one fire down at Rickard's Corner. Remember down, and that's when my buddy saved my life. When everybody else was standing there with a hose going into the place, and not realizing that one of the firemen was ready to hit the window and break it in. And when he saw that happen, he pushed me, and I went outside for that. The backlash came out.
And where was that? What?
Rickard's Corner on 42 and
42 and 287.
287,
Oh, okay,
called the Rickard's
yeah,
Corner.
yeah.
It used to be a motel and a gas station.
That's a daycare center now, isn't it, or?
Yeah,
That's a school.
Okay.
School.
Yeah. Yeah,
This George, the filling station fire, I was working that night at the station.
at the station? This is the Phillips,
The Phillips,
At the
yeah,
corner
where
of-
Lulu's is now,
yeah,
Main
the
and
corner of,
Pine.
basically it's Spruce and
Yeah.
Pine, yeah,
Main and Pine.
yeah, Pine, yes.
We had a garage in back of the station that was rented out and had a mechanic back there. And he had piled a bunch of oily hand rags, wipe rags, in the corner. And I smelled smoke. It's kind of scary working in a gas station. And so I went looking, and it was in the garage in back. Well, the only water tap we had was in the washroom, which was clear down on the north side, so I went to get the hose, and the hose wasn't long enough to reach back there. So I went to get the water, wash bucket filled with water. By the time I got back there, it was up the wall and into the upstairs. And so I turned the fire in that night. That was a scary one too. We had Les Davis and Joe Softage on that long ladder going up to the window that faced Main Street. And they were both on that ladder and hit that window and broke it, and they got that backfire, that backblast. Just about took them off the ladder, and that was pretty scary. But saved the building and saved the gas tanks from burning up and blowing up. and-
What year was that?
Oh, boy, I knew you were going.
In
That
general,
had to be about 1958, 57, 58.
did it,
No, had to be later than that, because I was already in the fire department.
Yeah.
I didn't go into 59, so it had to be
It's
early
early
sixties.
Yeah.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. So, was it during the day?
No, it was in the evening, about, 6 o'clock. I was working till closing.
So many of you
7
fought
o'clock.
that fire?
That was before my time.
Some of you did then,
Yeah.
yeah. And did the tanks blow?
No, the tanks were underground
Yeah,
and, but the fumes were there. And, it's always a danger.
yeah,
But we kept it pretty much contained to the upstairs attic, really. And when they got done, they tore down the old station and took the whole building out and then just put that small office space up front afterwards.
uh-huh.
That's still there.
Was that where the garage at one time was owned by the Kalachis?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's,
I was working for Joe Kalachi.
okay.
Is it, this is Gene again. After the highway mine fire, remember the
Yeah.
spittle, wasn't that when the women's auxiliary
Yes.
started?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
One of the ladies auxiliary.
Yeah.
So what was the highway mine fire?
Highway mine, that's on
287.
287 and
And Dillon Road,
Dillon.
144.
Okay.
Where-
Leo?
This
Go ahead,
Leo.
I'm sorry.
That was in 1954. That was a year before I got in the fire department. But yearly, the fire department used to have a fireman's ball. And it used to be in the American Legion Hall there across the street from the middle school. It used to be the American Legion Hall. And the call came in. Everybody was in their suits and ties and best clothes. All went out there and fought that fire. The tin was dropping off of the tipple down to the ground, and it was a heck of a fire to put out. People were running. I think somebody run through a barbed wire fence, and everybody tore up their clothes, and they couldn't use them again. We fought and begged with the owner of that mine. His name was Frank Yakis. Had him come to the meetings after I got in the fire department, pleading with him that he should at least reimburse some of the guys for the clothes they lost. But he didn't. None of them got anything.
Was he a
That's-
local man?
I don't know.
He
I
lived-
doubt
He
it.
lived in North Denver, I think.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
Didn't sound like it was a Louisville person. Yes, Bill?
Just, Bill, this is another story about losing clothes. We had a big haystack fire one time. I don't remember what year it was, when old Steve Harney's haystack burned that time
Oh, yeah.
during the day. And I had a brand new pair of Wellington boots, nice, beautiful leather boots. Went to that fire, ruined them boots, and I don't know what all at that fire. That one was a bad fire. It took forever to try to tear apart. We got Jack Var's construction company to come in with a loader to tear that haystack apart for us so we could put that fire. It was cold. It was in the wintertime. It was cold. Of course, we didn't have the fire gear that these guys got today. And you ruined your jeans, your shoes. I remember that very well. Ruined a brand new pair of Wellington boots at that fire.
So did that smolder for a long time?
Yeah, it was a couple days before that was all put together. We had it spread out all over up there. In fact, it's up there, I don't know, what is that up there now? What do they call that up off of,
Blue Heron. We had another one out there.
yeah, Blue Herring, but this is where Steve was up there. What's that neighborhood?
is-
It's all houses now.
Where houses are, not the
Yeah.
old
Yeah,
space
it's,
area.
Housing thing in the
What is it
park
up there
park
at
up
the end
there.
of Lafayette Street, up in there?
Yeah, I can't think of
Way
it.
up, you know.
That was
Uh-huh.
Steve
But
Harney.
it's
Steve
on-
Harney.
it's on the end of
Steve lived there,
Garfield.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
The
up there.
1000 block of Garfield.
Yeah, that was all farm back up in there in them days. That's where
Oh,
that
wow.
haystack was.
it's not very far away.
And that,
We had no protective clothing.
No?
None.
didn't have none.
This came later.
Yeah.
this is Howard, but in that fire, I was working nights, and I walked up there to see what was happening.
Oh, yeah, it was working.
And Jack grabbed me and says, "Why don't you join this department? We need help during the daytime." So
Oh, really?
I put my application in and I replaced Darwin Johnson.
Ah,
Was,
Speed.
he was,
Speed.
he had retired and
uh-huh,
they had the one opening, so I.
right. Well, were any of you chief at the time of any of the fires we've talked about?
The only one was at the Mercantile. And that was,
Chiefs came and went.
Who was chief?
The only one thing I
I think I
remember
was.
is Bill was chief
No,
for
I
2 or
don't know.
3 different years.
That's 71 to 73, but
Couldn't find anybody to volunteer
So
to be
he
the
had to
chief
keep it.
because they had to
Right.
work.
2 years I had it.
The
Uh-huh.
chief had the worst job of all. He had to spend more time book-wise
Oh, I suppose,
right?
yeah, yeah.
right.
than anybody.
Was it, were you selected by the other
The Piers.
peers?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was just a
To serve,
nomination
yeah.
and vote.
Yeah,
What kind of, this is Bill, I think, didn't it used to go kind of, if you were assistant chief, you was pretty much voted in as chief the next round, right?
Yes.
As I remember.
So if you were secretary and treasurer, it was.
That was a lifetime commitment.
We all voted against him, but he wrapped it up
Yeah,
every
you got
time.
railroaded in, you gave it up.
You didn't know.
I have to tell you one story about this man as chief.
Oh, no,
There was a
don't tell
guy
me
with
that.
a shotgun up on what was called the Beaupre property, up Spruce Street. And he was up there with a shotgun, and he was in the corn, how many rows,
I don't know.
and he didn't matter whatsoever. Bill went up parallel with him, and then rushed him and grabbed him up like a great big huge baby. Gun was laying across his front part of him, and Bill had him pretty near crushed, bringing him out of the cornfield.
Wow.
Yeah, he had, as I remember this, Bill, as I remember the guy had overdosed or something, you know, he went Lulabelle. I don't even remember who it was. But we had got a call on him, and he was afraid he was gonna kill himself. We chased him through the cornfield in front of him, caught him.
Bill almost killed him, just hugged him.
Yeah.
This is Ron. I'd like to speak for a moment on the different fire stations that we had at starting.
Absolutely.
The one on Spruce in Maine was mostly built by firemen at the time. That was in the fire department. They put the cinder block up, they laid the foundation and everything. And we utilized that station for quite a while, and we were able to get what is now Station 1 up on Main Street. Well, when that was built, it was just a skeleton. And
The one that's up near the middle school.
up by the middle school, it was, the whole thing was just building. And we went up with the firemen and we laid it all out and made the rooms, everything, got it all set up. And it just so happened that at that time, a train derailed. And it happened to have a bunch of drywall on it. And so we all got together, a couple, 3 pickups, and we put the drywall that was there in the Station 1. Everybody was hauling drywall.
Is that still there? Is that still a part of the,
No.
even with the
No,
remodel? or
It's
is
been,
it-
it's been
Yeah, it's been
remodeled.
remodeled,
It's been
yeah.
remodeled, but
By the
the
way,
only,
But that's
the
how
only
you
point
got
I
your
wanted
first
to make
drywall,
is
yeah.
that we built our own fire station, more or less. And,
the station was contracted.
Well, the
John
station
Fleming
was
built the
contracted.
station.
Yeah.
But
We did
inside.
the
Yeah,
inside.
right.
Everything
You
inside.
Volunteered to really, yeah,
and
put
that,
some work into it.
that just shows how everybody
No, Absolutely.
helps everybody.
Oh,
Yes, Leo?
And
Leo,
another
yeah.
point of interest, this is Leo again. To show how gung-ho our fire department was, I think Herb was chief at the time, Herb Steinbach, Jack's brother, and the Department of Boulder Rural, they dismantled, they just quit operations. So they had an old, what year do you think that was, about in the 50s, early 50s?
Well, that truck was older, that truck was
Anyway,
late
they had,
39 or early 40.
they had this little,
Yeah.
it was a pumper.
Yeah, but
They had
were
this,
using
they had this
it.
little truck, little Ford
Right.
truck, so Herb says, we'll take it. So
Before that,
we went and got the truck and we housed it there. But then we answered calls as far away as North Boulder.
Mhm.
Remember the champion horseshoe
Yep.
pitcher? I forget his name, Ted something.
Ted,
Ted Allen.
Ted Allen, okay?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
On this side of the street, on the south side of the street was Boulder city limits. On that side was county. Boulder didn't
Boulder
answer
didn't
it,
go.
but we took that little truck and went all the way up there in North Boulder and fought that fire for him.
That would have been Boulder Rural,
Boulder
but
Rural.
they had disbanded.
They
so.
disbanded. So
Yeah,
we
well,
kept that little truck for quite some time
Yeah.
and then they started up Boulder Rural again,
yeah,
so
we give it back to
we give it back to them.
We had that wildfire out there that started out in North Boulder and was coming east. And we was going out there and Ron was on the back of that truck right there and he lost his helmet. To this day, it's never been found that we know of.
They swallowed it.
Probably in Kansas.
Yeah,
I was
Probably in
on
Kansas.
the back of the truck with him that day.
Yeah,
See, Leo, again, that truck, Les Davis took and plumbed it so that we could have sprinklers on the front end of it so we could fight those rural grass fires.
Just drive the
Double
truck
field.
in.
Yeah, it had a manifold across the
Yeah.
front with about 8 nozzles.
Yeah.
On there.
Bill, you had something to say, remember?
I don't remember.
That'd be the first
Oh,
one.
oh, yeah, I do. On the fire that Ronnie was talking about, this Bill, the riding on the back of that truck when he lost his helmet. We got back to the fire station that night, and I had on one of the old fire coats that we had down there at that time. But it looked like a straw field, because all of these little pieces of weeds and stuff from that windstorm and blowing had stuck in that coat. It looked just like hair. But it was the little pieces of beards and sticks and leaves, stems from leaves and
That
stuff.
the wind was so,
It was so bad, yeah.
How those, this is Ron again, how those fires got started was the mine dumps. And the wind would come up and boy, that mine dump would be glowing red. Because it was still just
Spontaneous.
spontaneous, it was old
Ash out.
ash and everything out of the mine. And it was, eventually it was just shooting sparks
these were
out.
old mines
Clear
that
down.
were not being.
That would be the
mined
Centennial
then?
mine at that time.
Oh.
Right.
We had a,
Red ash. That's what all the
That's what all the streets were,
in Louisville
was, yeah, red ash.
That's
Oh,
what
the
they
red
used.
ash, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that blew all around.
They go out the mine and some street needed to be repaired, why, they go out and get a load and put it
Yeah.
down and roll it in and there it is.
Yeah,
this is Howard.
yeah.
And, you know, speaking of calls, we had a call out to one of the mines out here, what was it, what's the one out here on 42?
Centennial.
Centennial. And a calf had fallen down in the shaft. Bill and a couple of us went out there and we got the calf out of the shaft.
Put a rope around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so we done everything.
Yeah, we did.
Well,
In the, Leo again, in the 52 truck that we had, it had a little auxiliary pump in the back of it that was gas operated, you'd have to start, you know.
Right,
And then the only paved streets in town was Main Street. We used to take that truck and go up and down the streets, pumping water on the streets to keep the dust down.
oh, for the red
Yes.
dust, yeah,
Red ash.
yeah.
Speaking of,
we didn't, we
no, go ahead.
didn't only do fire calls and rescue calls. We had a call for a plane crash. 2 of our firemen were on the airplane. And we spent about 7 days, I think, before we found them. Riding around in little Piper Cubs and whatever out of Jefferson County
Yes.
Air Place, and it was all volunteer, mostly firemen that were on those planes up there looking. That's just before I came in, well, just when I came in as chief in 67. And, let's see, they lost 2 and
Australian
they
sailors.
lost 3 and 3 walked out.
And the last one
Yeah.
just died.
Yeah, here, 1 month ago.
Really,
Charlie
I think
Johnson.
Jack told me that you flew in one of those planes looking for,
One of the fellows was nicknamed Bull Moose, but you didn't dare say Bull Moose in front of his wife. She would be very vocal. His name is Albert. It's the top of her lungs, she'd shout.
Albert
was
was my
part of
uncle.
that.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Gene
Albert
Corporal.
was my uncle,
And he was,
Romano,
Albert, what was his last?
Romano.
Okay. Was he,
AKA Bull Moose.
oh, did he live or did he
Yes.
die?
he lived, he walked out with a
He had a
broken
broken
back.
back.
And,
Yes, sir.
and where did they find the plane?
Pingree
We
Park.
were up at
What was
Red
that?
Feather Lodge,
Yeah,
and we were headquartered there. And early that morning, we were just coming in, and they said they had spotted them walking out. It's in the Twin Peaks area in Rocky Mountain National
right.
Park.
Huh. And so how many, you said several of them died?
Three died.
Three.
Let's see, Jack was a fireman, and Dixie and Charlie Donato was.
Uh-huh.
And then Jack DiGiacomo, Bull Moose, and Charlie Grasso walked out. Charlie just died here 2 weeks ago.
And does anyone remember about what year that happened?
1967, late,
Yeah, because
yeah, early 67, April, March, April. Because Les Davis was going out as chief, and I was just coming in.
Were they going on a hunting trip or something?
Fishing.
Fishing trip.
I was supposed to go with them. They went to Flaming Gorge
Oh, really?
in Utah.
Yeah.
And I got sent out of town with my job, and I couldn't go fishing that weekend if they were coming home. And it was kind of bad weather, and
Yeah.
they got a little too far west, and instead of coming straight down from Laramie, they got off to the west and hit the mountain.
This is Ron talking.
Okay, Ron, and then, yeah.
I wanted to mention,
Yeah.
to go back a little ways, some of the different stuff that we did. Every Labor Day, we'd have to go out early in the morning and wash down the street. We'd
For the-
start,
Oh,
before
for the parade?
For the parade.
Before the parade.
We'd
But then you
start
had
up,
to be in the parade, right?
well, yeah, that's one thing we never did miss was the parade.
And I
And
don't
the-
think they miss it now,
The
do they?
past chief still
Yeah.
got the 32 in the parade now.
Uh-huh. We're always impressed with that.
And the ladies auxiliary did floats, and
Yeah, tell
It was
me
a
a little
big
bit
deal.
about the ladies auxiliary. So we started before that it was formed after one of the,
Well, for one thing, they were down at the Jefferson County Airport when the plane crashed, and they were passing out sandwiches and had coffee for everybody that was taking part of that.
but who got it started?
wasn't it the highway mine fire?
I
Yeah,
remind
they started after the highway mine fire in 1954.
And that was because they came out to bring food or something like that? Was that-
Yeah.
Coffee, sandwiches, what have you.
We were there all night.
Yeah.
You know, getting back to this, I'm Howard, and the thing, we used to have our annual banquet. We would all get together and put on skits. Chooch was our director, you know. We'd meet at Charlie's house and sing, and, well, I mean, it was a real production, and it was
I'm
great.
sorry I missed it.
It was, I mean, it was, I wished we would have filmed it, because it
What was
was,
the show that we did,
it was, Them Bones and
Laughing?
Laughing.
Oh,
Laugh.
Yeah, we-
I mean, it was just, but
Right.
that's the kind of camaraderie we had in the whole department. And it
His
was-
brother was named Long Jack, and that was named appropriately.
It was, I mean, it was,
Yeah, we used to have Halloween parties and dress up, and it was
It was
the fire
really a
department was a
community.
togetherness thing.
Yeah.
It was,
Well, what do you,
every holiday.
I don't want to finish before asking you a couple of things about what sort of advice or suggestions do you give, would you give to the people that are now fighting the fires? And the Louisville Fire Department, of course, is both volunteer and paid these days, but they still have a lot of volunteers, my understanding is. So what are some of the advice you might give them, or suggestions, yeah?
Howard, and I think to me, the thing of it is one of the things that we used to have was, you gotta be safe, you know? It's,
Right,
uh,
right.
Because you can't do anybody any good if you're hurt. So if you do the training, you know, practice what you're doing, then you're safe, then you can help the others. And there's been an awful lot of people that, you know, as far as I know, we've never had a major injury.
Yeah.
My favorite word is camaraderie.
It was just,
Uh-huh.
and firefighters are firefighters anywhere in the world you go.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
George, I think one of the best feelings you get out of being a fireman or having been a fireman is the fulfillment. You get a feeling of accomplishment and worthwhile to,
But
you
it's
know,
also a
to
dangerous
help
job.
your, yeah, and it's a
So you have
dangerous
to work
job.
together.
And the requirements today are much, much more than
I'm
we
sure,
ever
yeah,
had, so.
I'm sure.
But I still think
Yeah.
that it's an experience that is very fulfilling.
Well, I
Leo.
think, this is Gene again, but,
Okay.
you know, when you take a look at the reward, the recognition that they received this year,
Yes,
our
yes.
fire, it just shows something that they've been together, we've been together for many, many
It's been
years.
built up from the
Built up to
beginning.
what it is now.
That's right. Leo?
Leo, one last thing. There were so many of us that had our deep roots, were born here, been here most of our lives, and served in the fire department and served as chiefs. So in 1972, September of 1972, our past presidents and founders, Tom Cable and my Uncle Andy, had the idea that we form a past chiefs club. So we did, and September 27th, 1972, and we're still
You're
active,
still,
and we meet once a month
yeah,
to carry that on.
it's great.
And as far as we know, there's no other past fire chiefs club or organization anywhere.
What would you tell, say, a youngster, a kid that's maybe thinking he might be, or she, because there are women on the fire department now, if they'd be thinking about a career or volunteering? Do you have any suggestions for them?
Only one, it's a physical endeavor.
It's a commitment.
It's a time commitment.
Time
It's
commitment.
a time commitment, not for 2 hours a week. You know,
Right, right.
It could be 6 hours a week, it could be 40 hours a week, you know, so. But it's a commitment, and I think the ones that stick it out, you know, it's back to what George was saying, you
Right.
know. It's a fulfillment you get out of doing that for them years.
Anybody else? Any other suggestions?
There's been a heck of a tradition built, and
Right.
and hopefully, and it looks like they're doing
They're
a super job of
going on.
maintaining.
This
We're
fire
setting,
department-
we're setting in a new station here.
Yeah,
and,
this fire department is continuing on with all of the good stuff.
Yeah.
They're very well.
And again, that's why we're number one in the country.
That's right,
Right.
okay.
And it all came from years back, from all of the guys that you have here.
Well, it does,
Guys
it's carried on, yeah.
behind them,
Yeah,
Yes.
and
too,
it
it's
was
carried on.
commitment not only to the fire department, but to the city, volunteering, and, you know, as councilman, as whatever, and helping the city to become number one. We feel like a big part of that.
Yeah,
Very good.
The one thing, this is Bill, the one thing that I have to say, years ago, when we went on fire calls and our wives and families took care of themselves while we were taking care of other people. That was a big, big
so
thing.
it's a family. It's
It is,
really
it
a
is.
family
Our
commitment.
wives sat there and took care of our kids and our families, and we were out helping
And worried about
other
you
people,
too.
yeah.
There's
Or sitting down after the fire meeting playing cards and not getting home quite on time or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I heard there were little cards at the fire
Yeah.
station, and
Right.
maybe a little gambling once in a while.
Yeah.
There was also, and every one of us went through it, where you'd get up from a dinner table and you wouldn't get back for 2 hours. You know,
Right,
Sure,
exactly.
sure.
so-
Well, the fact that you did not lose a fireman fighting a fire is really
Kind of amazing.
It is
amazing
amazing,
and
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
We never
Yeah.
lost a foundation.
Really. A lot of brooks, but
Saved a
not.
lot.
But you saved a lot, and certainly Well, you hear about a whole town burning up, you know, and
Sure.
something. Look at this more recent, just last week in Quebec.
Yeah.
And, you know, an accident that's really burned the town
Yeah,
down.
well, in the
So-
old downtown, you know, the buildings are just
Right,
like that.
you had the
get one
trains going
going,
through,
You
sparks.
got a
and-
chance of all of them going.
Yeah, well, congratulations, man. You did a good job. And I want to thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
doing
Thank
this.
you. Thank you.
Right, right. Thank you, and thank you, Jean.